Meditation for self-love. When someone suddenly stops liking you, there's a particular kind of confusion that comes when someone's feeling toward you changes without warning. Not after a fight, not after something clearly said or done. Just a shift. At first there was warmth, ease, maybe even enthusiasm. They looked at you with interest, spoke to you gently. You could feel yourself being welcomed. And then slowly or all at once, something cooled. Messages became shorter. Their tone changed. The space between you widened, even when nothing obvious happened. If you've been there, you might remember how disorienting it feels. You replay conversations in your head. You scan your memory for a mistake. You wonder if you missed a moment where everything turned. Often there isn't one. What hurts isn't only the distance. It's the not knowing. You're left standing in the same place you were before. But now the ground feels different beneath your feet. There's a quiet question that starts forming inside. What changed? And sometimes even harder. What's wrong with me? You might notice a tightening in your chest when you think about them, or a dull heaviness behind your eyes. Maybe a subtle urge to shrink yourself, to be less visible, less real, just in case that helps. It's not dramatic pain. It's quieter than that. It's the kind that shows up when you're alone, when your guard is down, when you thought you were safe to be yourself. At first, they seem to like that version of you. Your openness, your calm, your presence. So when that same version no longer feels welcome, it can create a strange split inside. One part of you keeps saying, "But I'm still the same." Another part whispers, "Maybe that's the problem." You may start holding yourself more carefully around others, watching how much you say, measuring your tone, smoothing your edges before anyone else can see them. Not because you want to pretend, but because losing connection without explanation leaves a mark. There's also a kind of grief here that often goes unnamed. Not grief for a long history, not even grief for a deep bond, but grief for the potential, for the ease you felt at the beginning, for the sense of being seen before anything complicated entered the picture. It can feel unfair because you didn't ask to be idealized. You didn't promise perfection. You were just present. And yet, you're the one left holding the confusion. Sometimes resentment creeps in, theirs or yours. Sometimes shame. Sometimes a quiet self-doubt that lingers longer than the connection itself ever did. You might tell yourself to move on, to not take it personally, to toughen up, but the experience doesn't dissolve that easily. Because what's shaken isn't just the relationship. It's your sense of how you're perceived. You start wondering whether closeness is temporary by nature, whether being liked is conditional, whether there's a version of you that's safe to show and another that's better kept hidden. If any of this feels familiar, there's nothing unusual about you. This reaction isn't weakness. It's not overthinking. It's what happens when connection forms quickly, then fades without clarity. It leaves the nervous system searching for meaning. It leaves the heart slightly guarded, even when it wants to stay open. You're not imagining the shift. You didn't invent the warmth that was there before. And you're not wrong for feeling unsettled by its absence. For now, there's nothing to fix or understand. Just this moment of recognition. This is what it feels like when someone stops liking you, and you're left standing with yourself, trying to make sense of the quiet that follows. When something like this happens, the mind almost automatically turns inward. It starts searching for a personal flaw, a social misstep, a moment where you were too much or not enough. That search makes sense. The human nervous system doesn't like unanswered questions. When connection disappears without explanation, it looks for certainty, even if that certainty comes in the form of self-blame. But very often, what changed had little to do with anything you consciously did. Many connections begin not with seeing, but with imagining. At the start, people don't meet each other fully. They meet a felt impression, a mood, an idea, a reflection of what they're longing for. Someone might be drawn to your calm because they feel chaotic inside, to your confidence because they're unsure, to your kindness because they want to feel safe. In those early moments, you're not just you. You're also carrying their hope, their unmet needs, their inner picture of what this could be. That kind of connection can feel intense and easy at the same time. But it's fragile, because no one can stay inside someone else's inner picture forever. Over time, reality enters quietly. You have limits. You have moods. You don't respond exactly the way they imagined. You show a shadow or a hesitation or a need of your own. Nothing dramatic, just human texture. For someone who was unconsciously leaning on the illusion, this can feel unsettling. Not because you did something wrong, but because the nervous system experiences a loss of certainty. When the inner picture breaks, discomfort rises. And many people don't know how to stay present with that discomfort. Instead of noticing, oh, I was expecting something unrealistic, the mind looks outward for a cause. It's easier to feel disappointed at someone than to feel confused inside yourself. So the distance begins. Withdrawal, coolness, a subtle shift in tone, sometimes even irritation where there was once affection. This isn't usually a conscious decision. It's a protective response. When closeness was built on projection, reality can feel like a threat rather than a deepening. There's also a nervous system pattern at work here. For some people, initial connection activates excitement and openness, but sustained closeness activates vulnerability. And vulnerability asks for something different: patience, mutual adjustment, tolerance for imperfection. If someone hasn't learned how to stay regulated there, their system may quietly move toward distance instead. Again, not as punishment, not as judgment, as self-protection. From the outside, it looks personal. From the inside, it's often about capacity. This is why the shift can feel so confusing. Nothing happened, but something ended the illusion of effortlessness. When that illusion dissolves, two paths usually appear. One is staying, renegotiating, seeing each other more clearly. The other is stepping back, restoring inner balance by creating space. People who choose distance aren't necessarily unkind. They may simply not know how to relate once the fantasy phase fades. Understanding this doesn't erase the hurt, but it can gently loosen the grip of self-blame. Because the withdrawal wasn't a verdict on your worth. It wasn't a hidden truth about you finally being revealed. It was a collision between expectation and reality, between an inner picture and a real person. And you were always going to be real. That was never the mistake. When someone pulls away like this, there's often an urge to respond by doing something. To clarify, to explain yourself better, to adjust how you show up so the connection can return to what it was. This impulse isn't wrong. It comes from care. But beneath it, there's usually a quieter hope. That if you find the right angle, the right version of yourself, the distance will close. That's where things can start to feel heavy. Because now, instead of relating, you're managing. Watching yourself from the outside. Editing your words mid-sentence. Trying to sense what will be received well and what won't. It can feel like walking on slightly unstable ground. The body knows this state. There's a subtle tightness in the shoulders, a shallow quality to the breath, a background alertness that doesn't quite turn off. You're present but not at ease. Awareness begins not by fixing this, but by noticing it. Noticing how quickly attention turns outward, how the nervous system leans toward control when safety feels uncertain. This is a very human response. When connection feels threatened, the system looks for ways to restore balance. Sometimes through explanation, sometimes through self-adjustment, sometimes through withdrawal in the other direction. Awareness isn't about choosing the right response. It's about staying with what's already happening. You might notice the urge to reach out, and also notice the part of you that's afraid to. You might feel a pull to become more agreeable, and also a quiet resentment forming underneath. Both can exist at the same time. Relating with awareness means allowing that complexity without rushing to resolve it. Instead of asking, how do I get this person to like me again? The question softens into something simpler. What is this experience like inside me right now? That shift changes the relationship you're having, not with them, but with yourself. You're no longer abandoning your inner world in order to manage the outer one. You're staying. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean deciding what to do or not do. It means recognizing that your value isn't negotiated moment by moment through someone else's response. When awareness is present, you might begin to sense a subtle boundary forming. Not a wall, not distance, just a recognition that you don't need to perform your way back into connection. If someone can only stay close to an idealized version of you, then closeness was always conditional. And conditional closeness requires constant vigilance. Awareness lets that truth be felt, not argued. You may notice grief here, not only for the connection, but for how much energy you were willing to give up to preserve it. You might also notice relief, small, quiet, almost imperceptible. A moment where you stop adjusting your tone, where your shoulders drop just a little, where you let yourself be as you are, even if the outcome is uncertain. This is not detachment. It's presence without self-erasure. You're still open, still capable of care, but you're no longer contorting yourself to maintain something that's already shifting. Relating with awareness doesn't restore the old dynamic, and it's not meant to. It restores you to your own internal rhythm, to the part of you that doesn't need to be curated to be real. From there, whatever happens happens on more honest ground. And honesty, even when it's quiet, tends to feel steadier in the body. Sometimes, after understanding settles in, there's still a residue left behind. Not a story, not a question, just a feeling that lingers in the body. Maybe it shows up as a slight pressure in the chest, or a tiredness behind the eyes, or a soft ache you notice when things get quiet. This is often where people think something more needs to be done. But often, nothing is required beyond staying near the experience without asking it to leave. One gentle way of doing that is to let attention rest on something neutral and already happening. Not as a technique, not as a solution, just as company. You might notice the natural rhythm of your breath, not changing it, not deepening it, just noticing that it's there, moving on its own. Or maybe it's a sound in the room, a distant noise, the hum of something steady and unremarkable, or the simple weight of your body where it meets the chair or the floor. The anchor itself doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of attention. Unhurried, non-demanding. When the mind drifts back to the person, to the moment things changed, to what could have been said differently. That's okay. Nothing has gone wrong. Each time attention returns to the body, or the breath, or the sound, it's not a correction. It's a reminder that you're here, now intact. You're not using awareness to override the feeling. You're letting the feeling exist without having to narrate it. This can feel surprisingly unfamiliar. Many of us learn to process relational pain by thinking our way through it, by analyzing, rehearsing, reframing. Resting with sensation instead can feel exposed at first. But often, the body responds with a small signal of trust, a softening, a slowing, a sense that it no longer has to stay on guard. Not because the situation resolved, but because it's no longer being pushed away or interrogated. This kind of presence doesn't make the feeling disappear. It lets it complete its own movement, like a wave that doesn't need to be flattened, only allowed to reach the shore. There's no need to stay here long. No need to do it every day. It's simply an option, a way of being with yourself when the memory of being me seen still echoes quietly inside. Even a few moments of this kind of attention can remind the system, I'm allowed to feel this, and I'm not alone while I do. When you look back at an experience like this, it's easy to frame it as a loss. Someone drifted away. Something that felt promising didn't hold. But over time, another truth often becomes visible quietly, without needing to be declared. What ended wasn't your ability to connect. It was a particular kind of connection, one that couldn't stay once reality entered the room. That's not a failure. It's a clarification. Real connection has a different texture. It doesn't rely on you being consistently impressive, calm, or easy to be around. It has space for pauses, for misunderstandings, for moments where neither person knows exactly what to say. It allows the nervous system to settle rather than stay alert. When someone steps away because the illusion fades, it can feel like rejection, but often it's more accurate to see it as a mismatch of capacity. For closeness, for uncertainty, for seeing another person as they are. You didn't lose something stable. You encountered a limit. And limits, while painful, are honest. There's a kind of safety that comes from being seen partially, briefly, or conditionally. It feels good at first. Light, effortless, but it asks you to keep parts of yourself on hold. The safety that lasts feels different. It's quieter. It doesn't spike. It doesn't rush. It feels like being able to breathe normally around someone. Even when you're unsure, even when you're not at your best. When you begin to recognize this difference, confidence slowly shifts its meaning. It's no longer about being liked or being chosen. It becomes about staying aligned with yourself, even when connection changes. That kind of confidence isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as steadiness, as not needing to chase clarity from someone who has already moved away, as letting the ending be what it is, without turning it into a verdict on who you are. If someone couldn't stay once you became real, that doesn't mean you became less valuable. It means the relationship never had room for your full humanity. And that room matters, because the people who are able to stay, not perfectly, not forever, but honestly, they don't need you to remain an idea. They're relating to a person who changes, who learns, who has shadows and quiet days and unfinished edges. Connection that grows there doesn't feel dramatic. It feels grounded. It feels like being met, not evaluated. So if you're carrying the echo of someone's withdrawal, you don't need to rush past it. You can let it remind you of what you're actually available for now. Not illusion, not performance, just real presence shared slowly with those who can meet you there. And that's enough, even when it's quiet.